let's get into the top 10. Number 10, Kawhi Leonard. Now, to be clear, he's not the 10th best player in the league. He's probably much higher than that if he is healthy. But in this case, I felt like this was a smart place to put him, or a safe place to put him, that applies the appropriate respect to what he's done in this league while giving favor to the players in front of him who have been more impactful lately because of their health. And availability is absolutely an ability. But I do believe that people have massively overlooked. I shouldn't put it that way. I think that collectively, as a basketball community, we've kind of forgotten a little bit just how damn good Kawhi Leonard is. So these are his stats from the 2021 season, the year before he got hurt, obviously. Or the year that he did get hurt, I should say. 25, 7, and 5 on 62% true shooting in the regular season. In the playoffs, 38 and 4 on 68% true shooting. These numbers that I'm about to read you guys are just preposterous. Everything that you've heard from me in the last couple weeks as we've done these player rankings pales in comparison to the numbers that I'm about to read to you. 4.2 made restricted area field goal attempts at 77%. Like I said, for a big power wing, I want that around 70 on the low end. He's at 77%. That's damn near a rim finisher, like a guy, like a big man in the dunker spot. 2.3 additional paint field goals at 49%. That's incredible. 2.5 made mid-range jump shots per game on 66% shooting. That's outrageously good. That's unconscionably good. That doesn't even make sense. That's so unbelievably deadly from that range that it takes every analytical argument and just throws it out the window. 44% on corner threes and 39% on above the break threes. Just outrageously efficient. He scored on 58% of his post-ups. By the way, all these numbers I'm reading are from the postseason. These were from playoff series. He scored on 58% of his post-ups, resulting in 1.21 points per possession. He took 81 pull-up jump shots off the dribble in that postseason run and made 40 of them, damn near half. He's just absolutely insanely good. And I'm very, very excited to watch him play basketball again this year. You know, one of the things that I wanted to hit on here is the value of strength in basketball, because Kawhi Leonard is an extremely strong player. I had a foot injury after my freshman season in junior college. My first season in junior college, I was about 205 pounds and freaky athlete. Like, get my head at the rim. I was above the rim all the time, but I struggled to get to the rim as a slasher because I was pretty thin. So I suffered a stress fracture in that off season, and I had to take a couple of months off. And during that time, all I did was lift weights every single day. And I went into my second season at 225 pounds. So I'd add literally 20 pounds of muscle in one single offseason. And I ended up making an all-conference team that year. And a large part of that was the value of strength. It made me a much better rebounder. It made me a much better defensive player. And it made it so that when I was driving to the basket, I had an easier time maintaining my line, staying where I was, as opposed to people bumping me off my line. I think basketball players in general, are obsessed with keeping their weight down for the sake of mobility. And I do understand that. Don't get me wrong. Like, there is a balance here. One of my favorite examples of this is Andre Iguodala. He talks all the time. I think he plays around 220 as well. And like, he talks about how like 222 is about the high end of where he feels like he can be an impactful defender, but he's actually more comfortable about 220. And he makes the decision to get up to 222 when he has to guard LeBron James in a playoff series because he needs the extra weight. It was from, I think, one of his books a while back. But it's an interesting concept. There is a balance. There's a healthy balance between strength and carrying extra weight and keeping your mobility. But I think strength has vastly become one of the most underrated skills in the game of basketball, and there are not enough young players putting attention to detail into their strength training. Think of it like this. Every time you do anything on a basketball court, there's contact. Basketball is a contact sport. You are not just running free and loose all over the floor. People are grabbing you. People are holding you. People are trying to get in your way. People are fighting you for position. And in those situations, every little bit of muscle that you have is an extra ability to fight and claw for position. When you rip through and try to go to the rim, if a guy does a little bit of hand checking, which is probably not going to get called, it might be the difference between him containing you and keeping you in front and you ripping right through him and getting all the way to the rim. It's an immensely valuable skill, and it's one of the great reasons why Kawhi Leonard is so successful on the basketball court. He can get to any spot he wants on the floor. I've talked about this before ages ago, so a lot of you guys who have gotten onto the show recently won't remember this, but Kawhi Leonard uniquely with his fadeaway uses his strength to get easy shots. I always talk about the difference between making extremely difficult shots versus working really hard to get easy shots. You'll see guys like Steph Curry do this by moving without the basketball. You'll see LeBron James do this by quick duck-ins and seals around the basket to get easy layups. For Kawhi Leonard, you see it in his mid-range game. When he is working you from the perimeter into the lane and he's got you on his hip, he'll give you a hard bump with his right shoulder and then rise up from 17 feet. It's a wide open shot, even though he was guarded, because he's so damn strong that he bumped you off. With his fadeaway, I've talked about this before, there's two different kinds of fadeaway jump shooters. Fadeaway jump shooters who do it with their athleticism and fadeaway jump shooters that do it with their strength. Guy like LeBron, ironically, does it with his athleticism. He fades wildly away from the basket, almost like comically on his fadeaway. Kawhi Leonard, it's like a hard bump with his shoulder before he turns, and it's almost straight up and down. But that's why he's so deadly from that range. His fadeaway is not a difficult jump shot. It is a short, balanced, easy, open jump shot that he gets to by using his strength to work you to a spot on the floor where he's comfortable and then bumping you off with one of his big ass shoulders and getting up into his spot or getting up into his shot. And then that strength obviously continues to help you on the defensive end when you're the guy who's applying that physicality to the person that you're guarding. Moral of the story here, work on your strength. There's a fine line. You want to make sure that you're mobile and that you can cover the ground that you need to. But if you're a young basketball player, do not overlook the weight room. It's a very, very important part of the game. He's a dominant defensive player still, even though he's not quite what he was, but that's to be expected as he became, he was a defensive player of the year once, but that was in an era when he was not being used as much offensively, but still in high leverage moments, he can be a huge problem there. We even saw that as he made, obviously he can't shut down Luka, but he's made in his last two playoff runs where he went up against Luka Doncic, there were stretches of those series where he got onto Luka and made things extremely difficult and had some success there. On the playmaking front, he used to be pretty much the worst playmaking star in the entire league, like to the point where it was a glaring weakness. He's still in that conversation, but he has become respectable. Like he can make your basic pocket passes and pick and roll if you run drop coverage to him, or he can make basic kickouts. That is definitely a weakness of his, though. And then health is obviously a huge part of it as well. I've heard mixed intel on Kawhi's knee. I've heard from people that would know that it's degenerative and it may never get better. And then I've heard people say that, that's BS and he's fine. As is always the case, Kawhi Leonard keeps such a tight circle that it's really difficult to get a feel for the truth coming out of when it comes to reports on Kawhi. We talked a little bit about the Clippers last show and involving their roster, but I do think this is an interesting kind of like pivotal year for this era of Clippers basketball. We all think of the Lakers as the shit show and the Clippers as the team that have it together. And there's a lot of truth to that. The Clippers have a better owner that's willing to spend and that gets out of the way of basketball making decisions. That he accepts advice from people that know what they're talking about. The way that their roster is put together is extremely modern and forward-thinking and well-rounded and versatile. And they've got a really good basketball coach. They are well-run from the top down. But the reality is we've had 3 seasons of this battle for LA, and the Lakers have 1 championship and the Clippers have 0. For all you want to say about the unprofessionalism or whatever you want to say, the chaotic nature of the Lakers, they won a championship. And then they had another year that was successful despite injuries, and then they had this disaster. For the Clippers, they had an incredibly ugly, disappointing, blown 3-1 lead against the Denver Nuggets, and then they lost in the 2021 playoffs due to injuries, and they lost in the 2022 playoffs due to injuries. So the reality is that they have a big old bagel to show for their results, despite having a fantastic roster. As we've laid out before, at the guard position, they're stacked. Reggie Jackson, John Wall is a backup. Norman Powell is another small guard that can dribble drive. On the wing, they've got Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, Marcus Morris, Nicholas Batum, Robert Covington, Terrence Mann, Luke Kennard. Like, they are absolutely stacked there. And then they have a big guy, a solid big in Zubac that they can go to when they want to play traditional drop coverages and things along those lines. The pressure is on now Because if Kawhi gets hurt again or Paul George gets hurt again, it's no longer a question of bad luck. It's a question of the reality of their bodies and the way that they hold up under the grind of the NBA season. Because Paul George has a consistent injury history, and so does Kawhi Leonard. You have a roster completely stacked full of talent. You absolutely are a top-tier championship contender when you are healthy. You had three shots and nothing has come from it. This is the year. Kawhi Leonard and Paul George have to get this done. If they get hurt again, it'll be time for the Clippers to consider the reality of the fact that those guys can't hold up. And if they don't get the trophy when healthy, then that brings up an entirely different list of concerns. So the Clippers are absolutely under a lot of pressure to get it done this year. Number 9, Jimmy Butler. In this regular season, 21-6-6 on 59% true shooting. And in this playoff run, in classic Jimmy fashion, 27-7-5 on 60% true shooting. 4.7 restricted area makes on 71% shooting. That's fantastic in this postseason run. 1.6 mid-range makes on 41% in the mid-range. That's pretty damn good as well. Takes care of the basketball exceptionally well. He's never had a single postseason where he's averaged over 3 turnovers per game. There's nothing exceptional in the averages. When we look at Jimmy Butler's numbers throughout even in that 2020 playoff run, the one that he went to the finals and came within 2 wins of the title, there's nothing exceptional going on there in the averages. What happens with Jimmy Butler is one of the strangest things that I've seen in the game of basketball. On any given night, and it's unlikely, it's about a 1 out of every 4 chance, but on any given postseason night, he is capable of elevating his game to a level that is rivaled only by the all-time greats. He is a guy that on the vast majority of nights plays like a top 20 NBA player. But on any 1 out of every 3, 1 out of every 4 playoff games, he plays like a top 5 NBA player. I've never seen anything like it. It doesn't make any sense. In this playoff run, he scored 40 plus 4 times. He also scored 15 or less 4 times. In the 2020 finals, he scored 40 twice. He scored 40 in game 5 to extend the series and then scored 12 in the elimination game. That's just kind of the way it is. You saw it in this Boston Celtics series. It was like damn good at the beginning of the series, horrifically bad in the middle of the series, and then otherworldly good at the end of the series. It's a magic power. I have absolutely no way to describe it or explain it to you. It's just playoff Jimmy Butler. It's a phenomenon that I cannot possibly explain to you. He doesn't shoot the ball well enough consistently. He has legitimate weaknesses in his game that are the reason why he's a top 20 player, not a top 5 player. But those weaknesses just disappear and he becomes mini LeBron in these massive playoff games on occasion. I guess if I had to try to explain it to you, I would say it's a couple of those specific playoff things that I've always valued, right? Like strength. He's strong, so he succeeds in the physicality of the playoffs. He's a good playmaker in the right setting, although it does, again, nothing exceptional playmaking in the averages. But then he turns into a guy who can get you 12 assists a game in the right setting, right? He's clutch shot making. He can make plays at the end of games. That was a huge deal in the 2020 finals. Obviously, he's an impact defensive player. He's turned into, in the Miami Heat, like ball pressure system, he's turned into a menace. And then just the power of supreme irrational confidence. When Jimmy Butler gets in an arena with LeBron James, he thinks up here that he's every bit as good as LeBron James. That's obviously insane, but that's what he thinks. And when you couple that with all those things that I just laid out, you get a playoff Jimmy performance. You know, but if he could figure out how to keep his body healthy and to shoot the ball consistently well, I do believe he would be a consistent top 6 or 7 player in the NBA, a full-blown superstar. But those are the things that end up being inconsistent for him. His body pretty consistently breaks down as the season progresses, and his jump shot leaves him in a lot of important moments. But I have a ton of respect for Jimmy Butler. You know, again, that supreme confidence is everything. Like you've seen DeMar DeRozan be a better regular season player than Jimmy pretty consistently throughout his career, but then he'll get in an arena with LeBron James and he'll immediately kind of shrink and fall apart mentally. And then you'll see Jimmy Butler be like, nah, screw that. I'm better than this guy. You know, it is Heat culture personified. Everything about the Miami Heat franchise and what they've tried to do with Pat Riley and Eric Spoelstra, Jimmy Butler is the embodiment of that, and he's kind of the perfect guy to lead their charge. As far as the Heat go, they need more offense. I mean, that was what ended up ultimately holding them back. I think they would have absolutely made the finals if they had one other guy who could create his own shot. Like I said yesterday, I don't really see a realistic path to them getting Kevin Durant, yet the Heat keep getting mentioned in that conversation. God knows why. I would be targeting Donovan Mitchell if I was the Miami Heat, because I think that's actually an achievable player that they can get with the current assets that they have. And that's a much more interesting player to put in the backcourt alongside Jimmy Butler as a real scoring threat. I also think that Eric Spoelstra and Pat Riley would get him to commit again to the defensive end of the floor. Number 8, Joel Embiid. This is going to get me in trouble with some people, but it is what it is. That's how this works. In this regular season, 31, 12, and 4 on 62% true shooting. In the playoffs, 24, 11, and 2 on 59% true shooting, albeit he did have an orbital bone fracture. Before I get any further into this, because Jokic is coming up soon as well, I've talked about this before on this show, but I wanted to lay it out here for the sake of this list. I value perimeter players more than bigs. Like, we're going to get to it here in a second, but like, I have Jayson Tatum ahead of Embiid and Jokic. The reason for that is I value the role of what Jayson Tatum does for a basketball team more than the role that Joel Embiid or Nikola Jokic fulfills, even though they are the best centers that we've seen in recent NBA history. First of all, foot speed as the game has evolved and has become more 5-out, meaning more perimeter players and less interior players, and faster pace, meaning more pushing the ball in transition, foot speed has become immensely important. In those situations, slow, plodding bigs like Joel Embiid and Nikola Jokic can be exposed. Also, with the way that floor spacing works, it's a lot easier to deny bigs the basketball than it is to deny a perimeter player the basketball. The ability to dribble the basketball up the court against ball pressure allows you to as a perimeter player, to control your own outcome as you initiate the offense. As a big man, you have to fight for position someplace on the floor and get a post entry. Obviously, Nikola Jokic can bring the ball up the floor if he has to, but if you put some pressure on him, he can struggle with that as well. Bigs just in general, it's a different dynamic on the basketball court. This is why when I do all-time rankings, I keep bigs in a separate list from perimeter players. They play an entirely different position, and for me, I value what a perimeter player does more. Perimeter shooting, like both Jokic and Embiid are really inconsistent putting the ball in the basket from the perimeter. We'll talk about this a little bit more with Jokic in a little bit, but that becomes an issue when it comes to floor spacing and the way teams that can guard you. Also, contact that is allowed in the low post. With the way that the game has evolved, perimeter players are officiated in a very ticky-tack way. You can't touch them. You can't get up underneath them. You can't do that kind of stuff. Post players, it's anything goes. And so just with the way that the rules are, it's disadvantageous to be a big man who's operating around the basket. So those are, and just in general, when it comes to a confined half-court environment, a big perimeter player that can dissect the defense from all three levels, I think that's a level of value in the game of basketball that a big man cannot replicate. For the record, that's just my philosophy. This is just the way I see the game. So if you guys are at home and you're like, Jason, that's stupid, Jokic is the best player in the world, or Embiid's the best player in the world, big men are going to run the league, you're crazy, that's fine. As a matter of fact, write it out in the comments. I want to see you guys tell me why you feel that way. I'm not Mr. I have everything in the game of basketball figured out. I have my belief systems. You guys have yours. I try to listen to as many smart basketball minds as I can to try to learn. You guys know I'm not married to any sort of idea, so I want to hear why you guys think I'm wrong if that's the case. But just so you know, as an explanation moving forward, I value perimeter players more. So Embiid was 79% on 4.2 restricted area makes in the playoffs. That's excellent. He continues to be completely unguardable in single coverage. There are maybe three guys that I'd like their chances in that situation: Anthony Davis, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and Rudy Gobert. But even with them, Joel Embiid's going to have some wins in those situations. The revelation since the James Harden trade has been how good Joel Embiid is in short roll situations. James Harden, because of his ability to shoot off the dribble, forces guards to chase him over the top. And even though he's struggled to get downhill penetration the way he used to, teams are forced to bracket him because as he's coming off of that ball screen, the defender's caught in behind him. And so the the screen defender, the big, has to come up to contain James Harden. And so Joel Embiid's getting all of these opportunities in the short roll, catching the ball on short lobs or bounce passes right at around the semicircle. And he has been absolutely unstoppable in that position, getting fouls and finishes at the rim, even making some reads out of that situation, albeit that's a specific weakness of his. But that was the revelation of this playoff run and of this season. The James Harden pairing has unlocked Joel Embiid as a short roller. He's another guy that has supreme confidence, genuinely believes he's the best player in the world. That shows up in clutch shooting, despite him being pretty bad at putting the ball in the basket, away from the basket. As he gets further away from the rim, he's 100% a believer in his ability to make those shots, and you see that in big situations, just like it was at the end of that Toronto Raptors game that he stole up there in Toronto. And then he's a very good defensive anchor as long as he's allowed to stay at the rim. But that, again, brings up the shortcoming that I was talking about with bigs. Any scheme can force any smart team that has the personnel can go out there and force Joel Embiid to cover on the perimeter, pull him away from the rim, and that limits his impact. Now, obviously, I have Joel Embiid way down at 8, so there are some weaknesses that I'm going to point out here. In this playoff run, Joel Embiid shot just 33% on all attempts outside of the restricted area. So again, that's not paint, that's not short range, that's restricted area. So if he's not right under the basket, he's missing 2 out of every 3 shots. That was just in this playoff run, but it's been an issue for him throughout his career. And this is what I keep saying this on the show, and every time I get people that get upset. Joel Embiid is actually not that good at putting the ball in the basket as he gets further away. He relies on finishing at the rim and drawing fouls. That's where the vast majority of his offense comes. He has these highlight plays, a dream shake for a fadeaway jump shot, a nasty pull-up 3 over the top of Nikola Jokic off of a dribble combo. That all looks great, but in the percentages, it's not actually manifesting in results. That is a specific weakness of his. He relies heavily on the whistle. He's a very poor playmaker, averaged just 2 assists per game in this playoff run. This is something that I've talked about going into the season, coming out of the season. It's just a reality. If you double team Joel Embiid, he's not good at making reads out of that. Not a hyper criticism of him in general, because almost every big is like that. Even Jokic in this postseason run averaged 6 assists with 5 turnovers. So he's considered the best playmaking big in the world, and he had a pretty rough postseason as a playmaker. Anthony Davis can't read double teams. Karl Anthony Towns can't read double teams. So Embiid's is not like uniquely weak at that. It's just the reality of the way bigs are. And it also has a lot to do with the way floor spacing works in post-up situations. It's just tough to succeed there. He's always going to put up monster numbers, but his impact can be limited in a playoff series due to scoutable weaknesses. If you run the floor on him, he's going to struggle. If you double him in the post, he's going to struggle. If you make him guard in space, he's going to struggle. If you defend without fouling away from the basket, he's going to miss shots. So in a playoff setting, when a coach has a chance to scout and try out different things with personnel to see what works best, you can vastly limit Joel Embiid's impact. That's why he's at number 8, despite being potentially the best regular season player in the entire game. And last but not least, and this is just I have to reveal my biases. I'm not a huge fan of Joel Embiid in general. And the main reason has to do with his foul baiting approach. I'm not going to lie to you guys about that and act like I'm being 100%, unbiased. I'm not a huge fan of Joel Embiid. The way he approaches the game, I've tweeted out dozens of clips over the years of him like being wide open, 4 feet from the basket and like jumping into a guy's chest and kicking his legs and falling over, and me being like, dude, what are you doing, man? And then you watch him in interviews and he genuinely thinks he's getting fouled all the time, which guess what? He does get fouled a lot, just like every NBA superstar. The difference is he makes a clown show out of himself trying to draw free throws in those situations. Now, I would never accuse him of doing this on purpose. He absolutely did not do this on purpose. But on the play where Joel Embiid fell over and ran into Danny Green, he was flopping. and he flopped and fell with his giant frame on the floor and slid into his own teammate and ripped up his knee. Now, in general, when we all go up to LA Fitness and we play, or you're playing in your men's league, or hell, if you're playing a different sport, it's generally considered reckless to throw your body on the floor around knees and ankles. But to Joel Embiid, it's all about getting those 2 free throws. And I genuinely have a problem with that as a basketball fan. So that I just feel I feel like it's important for me to point that out, because that absolutely is going to color my analysis of him. I'm human just like all of you guys. I'm not immune to biases. I have a problem with his foul baiting approach. I thought he played a role in Danny Green's injury, even though it wasn't on purpose. And he's just not my favorite NBA player. All right, number 7, Nikola Jokic. 27, 14, and 8 on 66% true shooting in the regular season. That's insane. 31, 13, and 6 on 64% true shooting in that playoff series against Golden State Warriors. Really damn good. 4.7 made restricted area attempts on 72%. 3.4 other paint makes on 61%. That's great. More methodical and under control than Embiid. He has more of like a view of the full scope of the game. I talk about flow of the game all the time, but understanding the value of 60 possessions over the value of 6 possessions. The best example that I can think of to demonstrate this to you guys was their regular season matchup this year in Philly, which Denver won, by the way. But early in the game, Embiid was having his way with Jokic on a handful of isolation possessions. He was hitting crazy, wild crossover jump shots and drawing fouls and just having his way with Jokic on a handful of possessions. Then on the other end of the floor, there were a couple plays where Jokic tried to score over Embiid and struggled against his size and length. If you look at that as the one-on-one matchup for a small handful of possessions, you might think, oh, Joel Embiid's the better player. But each player impacts the game beyond those moments, because there are 60, 70, 80 possessions in a game depending on the pace, right? And it's actually about what happens with your team in the totality of those possessions, not in the small handful. I did a video on this. You'd have to dig way back into my Twitter mentions to find it. But in the regular season, towards the end, after Philly lost at home to Denver, I did a video breakdown of exactly what I'm talking about, so you can see some representations of this. But in that game, Jokic won it in the second half with little things that didn't show up in the box score. He would consistently get the rebound after getting a stop and make a quick outlet pass to a streaking Denver Nugget who would run a quick 2-on-1 break or 3-on-2 break and get a layup. And on most of those plays, he did not get an assist because there'd be an additional pass after. But Jokic, one of his best strengths is kickstarting a break with quick rebounds and outlet passes. It's a unique skill that not many bigs in the league have. It used to be one of Kevin Love's greatest skills back in the day. But that he won that game by kickstarting their fast break, which got Bones Highland going. And then Bones Highland made a couple of massive threes at the end. And then the same way that Embiid has always struggled, Denver crowded him and got the ball out of his hands at the end of the game, and he couldn't score. And they lost. So again, I've always believed that basketball is a very intricately complicated game, that there's 100 different moving parts and it can never be simplified down to one thing, like a one-on-one possession. And I say that as, I'm a scorer. I build my game around things like what Embiid does. I love the footwork and the fluidity that Joel Embiid has. That to me, I have a great deal of respect for the amount of work he put in to do those things. I'm just saying that's one small part of the larger organism that is the game of basketball. And Nikola Jokic is so much better at things surrounding that he's actually a better basketball player. You know, I talked about this earlier, but most bigs struggle with playmaking. Jokic had a pretty rough postseason, albeit missing a bunch of his personnel. Only had 6 assists with 5 turnovers per game, but he is the best playmaking big that we have in the league. And there's a great deal of value when it comes to playmaking out of the high post. Denver's offense is primarily predicated on Jokic catching the ball at the elbow extended up, okay? And running dribble handoff actions or screen and roll actions with guys like Michael Porter Jr., guys like Jamal Murray, who both were hurt, and in this past season, lesser guards, right? But in that situation, the threat of his ability to turn and shoot and the threat of his passing ability makes it extremely difficult to guard, because most of the guards that they play could shoot So you'd run that dribble handoff, and the guard would have to chase them over the top. And the guard's either going to get a head of steam as the Jokic's defender has to step over to contain, or he's got to stay with Jokic, in which case the guard gets easy stuff there. The reason why his playmaking is so valuable there is the middle of the floor is known in the game of basketball as the hardest place to double team. If you double team in the low block, it's easy to kind of set up your spacing in a way that you can help out of the weak side corner, but make them throw a looping skip pass. It's really difficult. It's really difficult to make them pay for double teaming there. If you double, on the perimeter, right? Like if you double, on the left wing or on the right wing, there's a lot of ground to cover on the other side of the floor that allows you to rotate, right? The ball has to be thrown in a looping manner across the floor. But if I'm dead center of the floor, if I'm at the elbow, if they double team me there, it's a quick pass to the open man. And that specifically is what makes Jokic such an effective playmaker out of the high post. It's the location on the floor, the way that it makes it difficult for teams to double, and the way that it frees things up for his guards. The one thing that is a massive red flag for Nikola Jokic right now is the deterioration of his perimeter shooting. And I was on this a little bit towards the end of the regular season, and I thought it was a big part of what made him struggle so much towards the end of the season, opening the door for other MVP candidates, and also what ended up hurting him in the Golden State Warriors series. Not that I thought he had a realistic chance to win that series, but he's a career 41% three-point shooter in the postseason before this year. 41% on 207 attempts. So Jokic used to be a deadly three-point shooter. Something happened. Not sure what it is. He was 19% from three over his last 21 regular season games. And he was 5 for 18 from three in the playoffs. Overall, in this playoff run, I think he was 38% when he got away from the restricted area, if I remember correctly. Don't quote me on that because I didn't put that stat down in my notes. But he struggled to shoot as he got further away from the basket. What that causes, now that same dynamic I was talking about earlier with those dribble handoffs with Jokic. Obviously, the guard has to chase over the top, right? Because of the shooting ability of the guard, right? So, in that situation, the fear is I have to leave Jokic as the big man defender in order to help my guard get back into the play on that dribble handoff. That's terrifying if Jokic can shoot. But if he becomes a non-shooting threat, which he was over the course of the end of this season, the last quarter of the season and in the playoffs, if he's a non-shooting threat, there's way more freedom for the big man who's guarding Jokic to drop back off of Jokic and help in those dribble handoff actions. That is something he's going to have to fix in time for this next season for Denver to reach their ultimate ceiling. And then lastly, there's some major defensive limitations. He's turned himself into a solid drop coverage big against teams that drive right into him. But I did another video on this that you can find in my Twitter feed if you're willing to scroll back far enough, from a game that the Boston Celtics beat the Denver Nuggets. And in that game, Boston was routinely barbecuing Jokic in a drop coverage because he was sitting too far back. He lacks foot speed. So the only way to utilize him as a defensive player is to have him drop back and have him hover around the rim so that he doesn't have to cover out on the perimeter. You saw this in further detail in the Golden State series when Steph Curry kept attacking him in drop coverage and was just going right around him to get to the rim whenever he wants. That's not necessarily a Jokic weakness. That's more of just a big, slow center weakness. It's one of the many reasons why I'm kind of anti-big, slow center in general. But that makes him a functional regular season defensive big, but a defensive big that has some limitations in the playoffs. That's one of the many reasons that I have him lower on this list. It's time for Nikola Jokic to have his guys, to get Jamal Murray back, to get Michael Porter Jr. back, because I'm ready to see him play with some stakes again. The last time we saw Jokic play with real stakes and with a real team, he straight up outplayed Kawhi Leonard in a playoff series. Now, the unique thing there, I'm saying that for a specific reason. I was really hard on Anthony Davis when I think I had him back at like 18 in this list. That's a reminder of just how damn good Anthony Davis was in the bubble. Because in the same way that Jokic outplayed Kawhi in that second round series, Anthony Davis outplayed Nikola Jokic in the conference finals. So it's just it's a reminder of just how damn good Anthony Davis can be when his head is right, when he's healthy, when he has his body weight down, and when he can actually knock down perimeter jump shots. But I'm ready to see Nikola Jokic play with some stakes again so we can see what he's got. And last note there, my guy Carson thinks that Nikola Jokic might be the best player in the league, so sincere apologies to Carson for ranking him so low. I'm sure I'll be hearing about that soon enough. Number 6, Jayson Tatum. 27, 8, and 4 in the regular season on 58% true shooting. 26, 7, and 6 on 56% true shooting in the postseason. A lot of that was taken away by a bad finals performance. He averaged 22, 7, and 7 on 37% from the field, 46% from 3, and 66% from the free throw line in the finals. That bad series against Golden State kind of took away and kind of took the shine off the apple from what was an incredibly dominant regular season and postseason run. And that's why I have him as high as I do. He's kind of like the reverse DeMar DeRozan or Brandon Ingram. I talked a lot about those guys being like 3-level scorers that are primarily rim and mid-range oriented that struggle as they get out to like 23, 24 feet, especially above the break. Tatum is like the opposite of that. He only shot 60% in the restricted area in this postseason run. That's bad for a player of his size and athleticism and strength. Like I always say, for big wings, I want that number at least 70%. In the paint non-restricted area, only 32%. That's bad. Mid-range, 37%. That's not great. But he was 41% on 7 above the break threes per game. That's outrageous efficiency. 46% overall from 3 in that postseason run. So that's a great example for how shot value can overcome shot conversion rate. Because those numbers that I threw out, 60% in the restricted area, 32% in the paint non-restricted area, 37% from the mid-range, that should not amount to a 56% true shooting percentage. The reason why it does is because three-pointers are worth 50% more than any other shot on the floor. And if you make those ones, it will offset a lot of your inefficiencies elsewhere on the floor. But that's a great area of opportunity for Jayson Tatum, because what I would tell Jayson Tatum is it'd be like, hey man, you shot 46% from 3 in the postseason. You shot 41% above the break. You're probably not going to get much better there. You have just about maxed out that ability. If you can polish up these other areas of the game, you can be the type of offensive engine that a LeBron James or Kevin Durant is. That's the next step for him in terms of his 3-level scoring. He had 8+ assists 7 times in this postseason run. And in those games, the Celtics went 7-0. Tatum's an interesting player in the sense that if you catch him on the right night, he looks like a legitimately great playmaker. But if you catch him on the wrong night, he looks like a tunnel vision player that doesn't understand how to run a team. Some of that's youth. Some of that is this is still really only like his 2.5 seasons of him being a primary ball handler, so he just needs a lot more reps. But make no mistake, he's got that high-end playmaking potential. 8+ assists 7 times in a postseason is a very, very good marker, and the 7-0 record is a demonstration of the way that impacts the team. That's why I was pleading all postseason long, pass the ball, Tatum. Pass the ball, Jayson. That's how you're winning games, I tweeted this out earlier today, and people were actually pretty receptive to it, which I was surprised. In all of my evaluations over the course of this last season, postseason, and this summer, I'm not sure that I saw a perimeter defensive player better than Jayson Tatum. If you watch the tape of the first round against Brooklyn, yes, there was a team defense that was backing him up, an outstanding team defense. But the job that Jayson Tatum did on Kevin Durant was extraordinary. He was kind of this unique capability of applying pressure, like getting up and being disruptive with Durant, while at the same time having the lateral quickness to contain his dribble drives. I always talk about the difference between positional and aggressive defense. He can do both, which is what makes him so damn impactful on that end of the floor. Again, he's not the best defensive player in the league. I think that's Giannis. The best defensive player in the league has to be able to succeed as a backline defender, as a screen and roll defender, and as a perimeter defender. He has to be able to guard guards, wings, and bigs. Giannis is the only player in the world, really, that can do that really, really well. There are a handful of players that also can. Anthony Davis, Rudy Gobert, right? He's not the only one, but I think Giannis is the best. But strictly when it comes to I need someone to guard a superstar wing or guard for a playoff series, I think Tatum is the best guy you could have for that role. It's a testament to the muscle that he's put on to become more stout and difficult to bully to spots on the floor. It's a testament to the length of his arms. It's a testament to his athleticism. It's a testament to his basketball IQ and his ability to anticipate the moves that people are making. And lastly, it's a testament to his effort and focus and him devoting resources to being a dominant defensive player. The biggest weakness for Tatum right now, and it's the reason why he lost in the NBA Finals, is offensive process. Like I said, he had 8+ assists 7 times and went 7-0 in this playoff run. He also had 4 or fewer assists 7 times in this postseason run and went 1-6 in those games. He had 6+ turnovers 7 times. Celtics went 3-4 in those games. So his focus, and this isn't entirely his fault. He grew up a classic wing scorer, and he's been grooming himself to become a traditional point forward a la LeBron James, a player that starts from the top of the key, runs 40, 50 actions a game, and is responsible for creating shots for his teammates. That's a different role than more of like an unlocked perimeter scorer that is more like the tip of a spear. He's going from being the tip of the spear to being the actual total spear. It's a totally different role. So that's why he's undergoing kind of like an identity crisis on any given night. Catch him on the right night, he's bought into that role, he's passing the ball, the team looks great. But if you catch him on the wrong night, it's more like the old Jayson Tatum. It's really bad shot selection. It's all of those things, and the team struggles. I think he'll get better with that as time goes on in his career. His rim finishing is another huge weakness. Like I've always said, for big, strong rim pressuring wings, I want at least 70% in the restricted area. He was down to 60% in this playoff run. Huge part of the problem there is him seeking fouls. He does that James Harden thing where he constantly extends his elbows out and tries to go up through people to draw fouls. That's great when it works and you draw a foul. But what ends up mostly happening, especially as you get deeper into the playoffs, is they let that stuff go. And now what you did is you extended the ball out and made it a lot easier for guys to knock the ball out of your hands. And so that leads to him missing layups, falling into camera row, and complaining at the refs while the team is running down the other way to get a layup. And so that's where I've talked about this before, but he needs to adopt that LeBron James approach. Tuck the basketball like a football player. As you pick up your dribble, rip through the traffic, and then extend with both hands and finish at the rim. That'll be the difference between him finishing 60% in the restricted area and getting back up into the 70s where he belongs. And then, like I said earlier, 32% paint non-restricted area, 37% for mid-range. That's not good enough either. You want to be as versatile and you want to be like Kawhi Leonard. You want to be like Paul George. You want to be like these guys where they don't really have a weak spot on the floor. You want to be comfortable everywhere on the floor. The only way to do that is to polish up those short-range jump shots in the paint and getting more proficient with his mid-range jump shooting. The last thing I wanted to say about Jayson Tatum is it's easy to get really down about what happened in that NBA Finals. It's easy to look at that as a huge negative, like, oh, he's not that guy, or he's not ready, or whatever it is that you want to say. I view great value in the failure, in playing poorly, particularly on a big stage. I've talked about this with LeBron a lot over the years, but I think the best thing that happened to LeBron James in his career was losing the 2011 Finals. I think he was accustomed to a certain level of work, and then he got humiliated. And then the dominance that followed that was directly a result of the lesson that he learned in 2011. The LeBron post-2011 doesn't even resemble the LeBron pre-2011 in demeanor, in professionalism, in work ethic, and it showed in the a diversity of his offensive attack. That's what caused him to put in the work to become a reliable jump shooter. That's what unlocked his low post game, which has become a huge part of his career as he's gotten older. That 2011 is viewed as a black mark by most people. I don't really think that's the right way to look at it. If he had a black mark like that and it became like James Harden, where it was like that year in and year out, that's a different story. But he responded to that black mark by putting on a stretch of remarkably dominant NBA basketball. 4 championships in 8 years or whatever it was. I can't remember off the top of my head. But the point is that failure could be the catalyst to the next phase of his career, right? That's the way I look at it with Jayson Tatum. He got this close to an NBA championship. In fact, he should have won. As I said after Game 3 of the Finals, the Celtics were the more talented team. not the better team, but they were the more talented team. The reason why they lost was in large part due to Tatum's struggles. So there was a Larry O'Brien trophy right there for the taking. He was this close, and his weaknesses led to him losing that trophy. It slipped out of his fingers. I expect him to view that as a catalyst moment in his career. And I think moving forward, he will understand the fact that him being the point forward versus the scoring forward was the reason why he had so much success in that run. I believe he will replicate that. And I think Jayson Tatum is going to have a really dominant stretch of basketball over the course of the next few years. All right, so we are going to be doing the top 5 over the course of the next week or so. Again, I'm going to do one player at a time there. I'm also going to be doing some, not revisionist history, but kind of reviewing their history, talking about their major moments in their career, their major achievements, their development over the course of their career, intricate details of their skill set. I want to take my sweet time getting into those players. I'll be reading the comment section later tonight. I want you guys to drop any suggestions for things that you guys would like to see in those videos so that I can cater them to you guys a little bit better. As always, I sincerely appreciate your support, and I'll see you guys in a couple of days.